Division and polarization are on the horizon of Latin American politics. In the build-up to the Mexican-Ecuadorian crisis, comments from Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador regarding the political convenience of the murder of then-candidate Fernando Villavicencio are believed to have been the straw that broke the camel's back. This assassination arguably prevented Citizens' Revolution candidate Luisa González, who had a 15-point advantage before being blamed for the murder, from winning the elections, thus keeping the US-Ecuador treaties on track. Now, the son of the richest man in the country, who was born in Miami, is in control of emergency powers, and he is not afraid to use them, as the world could see in the video of the assault on the Mexican embassy. We spoke with Luisa González, former presidential candidate and one of the leaders of the Citizens' Revolution. Luisa, nice to meet you. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks, Oscar. It is a pleasure for me to be able to address the citizens who listen to us, to the world, and to be able to conduct this interview with you.
We have several questions that continue to grow as the days go by, with an Ecuadorian government that continues to take steps that gives us a lot to think about. For example, what just happened at the Mexican embassy seems to me to be not only wrong, but also a good move, because now no one's talking about Luque Lecaro and no one's talking about the last administration and all the crimes that could be proven were committed in that time period. What do you think about this?
¿Qué es lo que usted piensa de todo esto?
Firstly, there is a concern that attention is being diverted from the central issues that concern us as a country. Security in the country has not improved, extortion persists through what is known as a vaccine, violent deaths continue, and poverty persists without decrease. Additionally, there is no plan to alleviate this poverty or stimulate economic reactivation. Despite promises that 100% of high school graduates would gain access to universities, many young people still lack access. Moreover, the budget for higher education has been reduced. These are central issues that should be part of daily discussions, but the focus has shifted due to the invasion of foreign territory, such as the Mexican embassy. What is concerning about this armed and illegal incursion into the embassy? It is alarming because trade in goods and raw materials with Mexico amounts to approximately $1 billion annually, or at least that was the estimate from the previous year. If trade relations with Mexico are severed, we will likely face problems in the national economy. This could lead to increased unemployment, poverty, and violence, issues that we must strive to reduce. Despite Ecuador's tradition of being a peaceful and law-abiding country, we are now an international embarrassment. However, this is not the first shameful event at the international level led by the President of the Republic. The initial misstep and international blunder occurred when, in failing to honor the contract made with Russia, Ecuador took Russian weapons and helicopters and delivered them to the United States, falsely claiming they were scrap metal, thus violating the contractual procedure. As a result, Russia imposed restrictive measures on Ecuador in terms of trade, and we are still facing the consequences, unable to fully regain export levels we had in the past. This impacts employment, particularly in the central area of the country, especially in the Sierra Centro region. This was followed by a disgraceful incident in Spain where the president was involved in a public scandal, famously known as "Take Me Partying in the King's Car," a matter that is currently under investigation in the Spanish Congress. And now this shameful act, which defies all logic, such as attacking a diplomatic headquarters. They claim that Jorge Glass wanted to escape. Where is the evidence, or how was it determined that Jorge Glass intended to flee? This assertion is false, isn't it? But if they cover it up, claiming they made that decision to protect democracy and ensure the security of the country, then we must question, where were Colón Pico and alias Fito, two leaders of criminal gangs linked to drug trafficking, never placed in a maximum security prison themselves? Moreover, they were allowed to escape, were not monitored, and to this day, they have not been recaptured.
Los dejaron escaparse, no estuvieron vigilados y hasta el día de hoy no logran recapturarlos.
Sí llama un poco la atención de la dualidad un poco que hay ahí, ¿no? Porque por un lado
Yes, it is noticeable that a strange duality exists there, because on one hand it is a very fierce hunt for political rivals, but on the other it seems that crime is growing and impunity is growing, and Lasso's case, key witness, is in Argentina and they don't extradite him. And there are other cases where that urgency has not been seen, for example, Lenny Moreno's case. But the most important question I have for you today is, we have studied the treaty with the United States and its origins, and it's obviously clear that this was negotiated much earlier, before the last security crisis. It was negotiated in 2021 and perhaps before, by Guillermo Lasso and Yvonne Baki and other people. So in 2022 there was a ceremony where the congressmen, who they don't know, I don't know if they hire or gather support, were passing a law that entered in NDAA fiscal year 23 on friendship between the United States and Ecuador. In that law, it is mentioned that the focus of this law is to deal with forces, what's the word? Internal and external evil influences. They mention external evil influences, which are obviously Russia and China. But then they talk about internal evil influences. Obviously, they don't mention names there, but if you look there, it is clear that they are talking about the anti-mining movement, the indigenous movement, and I think also about the citizens' revolution. Which brings me up to what the president of Mexico commented on, which drew attention from outside the country, which is that you were going to win the elections with 50 points of difference to the second on the elections. Villavicencio was not second, but in any case, at that point, Villavicencio was killed. He was someone who was not controllable, who was also asking questions about the corruption of the Balkan Mafia and the Ecuadorian government. And the next thing you know is that very conveniently you lose the election. They blame you guys for the murder, and someone who was not even in the top 5 in the polls wins the presidency out of nowhere. And if we analyze who benefits, had you won the election, those treaties that have been negotiated with the US with so much time and effort, it is very possible that they would have gone to waste. And now the next thing we know, after all this happened, very conveniently, is that somebody who was born in the United States, someone who is the son of the richest man in the country, someone who represents corporate power, not just national, but internationally, is in power and exercising these treaties and these policies with an iron fist. What do you think about this?
políticas con mano de hierro. ¿Qué es lo que usted piensa de todo esto?
Bueno, aquí hay varios puntos, ¿no?
Well, there are several points to address here. Firstly, in Ecuador, there is a political actor whose actions are difficult to comprehend because he holds a diplomatic position. I am referring to U.S. Ambassador Fitzpatrick, who, instead of fulfilling the role of a diplomat, behaves more like a political actor. He issues statements, makes directives, and sets a course of action against the citizen revolution opposition. According to leaked chats between Roni Alealga and the general prosecutor, it is alleged that the prosecutor's office discovered, and prosecutor Diana Salazar also knew, who murdered Mr. Villavicencio, but they did not disclose it by order of Ambassador Fitzpatrick. They allowed the citizen revolution to be accused in order to undermine the candidacy of Luisa González and the citizen revolution movement. We observe a common agenda across Latin America characterized by combativeness, aggression, and political, judicial persecution through the justice systems of progressive countries. This pattern is evident in Argentina, Bolivia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Brazil. It's the same script, even down to the details. Similar tactics were employed against Cristina Fernandez and Rafael Correa. Someone presents a notebook claiming to contain evidence of alleged corruption cases. Interestingly, in these corruption cases, the companies that paid the bribes, such as Odebrecht, escaped any significant consequences. It's quite perplexing. And this Odebrecht case has already been dismissed in Brazil, and the same would hold true in Ecuador. There have also been pronouncements at the United Nations level calling for the impartiality of judges and magistrates. In a report, Mr. Garcia, I can't recall his name at the moment, but it is Garcia, indicates serious defects of illegality, violations of due process, and unconstitutionality in the exercise of judicial functions, suggesting that the judges are biased. This demonstrates a pattern of judicial persecution, a political agenda carried out through the judicial system. This pattern is replicated in Bolivia, Brazil, Argentina, and Ecuador, suggesting a common thread akin to what I would term the Condor Plan, version 2.0. Corruption is linked to the right, and when this occurs, the mainstream media tend to cover it up. For instance, if President Noboa truly wishes to investigate narco-politics, violence, and crime, the first step should have been, as you mentioned, to bring Luque Lequero to Ecuador. The second step would be to thoroughly investigate the León de Troya case, which suggests links between Balkan Mafia and the Lasso administration. This case was investigated by the police and the United States, the United Kingdom, and Ecuador, but it was closed by order of the prosecutor, according to Lieutenant Rengel. However, none of this has been analyzed, and the investigation of these cases has not been pursued. Instead, President Daniel Noboa stated that he will not prosecute Mr. Guillermo Lasso. It's unclear whether he meant not going after him or not seeking justice. There is evidence linking Mr. Guillermo Lasso to the Albanian mafia, drug trafficking, and organized crime, with his close circle and family implicated in these activities. When I made these statements to CNN, the network edited out that part of the interview. It appears there is an agenda to shield violence, crime, and connections to drug traffickers in politics, particularly when associated with the right wing. Meanwhile, there is an attempt to fabricate false narratives and engage in a defamation campaign against progressive governments. The evidence of narco-politics has been found out predominantly within the right wing. At least in Ecuador, it is clearly identified in the León de Troya report, which implicates former President Guillermo Lasso. Yet the hegemonic media, the national police, the prosecutor's office, and the Court of Justice remain in absolute silent complicity.
Absolutamente todos en silencio sepulcral.
Este caso me recuerda un poco a lo que pasó cuando invadieron Roma, ¿no? Cuando cayó, estaba a punto de caer Roma y llamaron a Julio César para que salve a Roma.
This case reminds me a little of what happened when they invaded Rome. Rome was about to fall, and they called Julius Caesar to save Rome because the barbarians were at the door. In this case, the barbarians who are at the door will be the crime that grew exponentially in 7 years of neoliberalism and disinvestment in the state. And now to deal with that, Daniel Noboa received emergency powers, and also with the political capital that he has, due to the circumstance, it's like he has a blank check. A blank check that he might have been wasting, but it's there. And my question to you is that we're already beginning to see this, but do you think that Noboa is going to continue using these emergency powers, this war on terror, terrorism, and everything else to suppress Ecuador's anti-mining and anti-neoliberal resistance from the indigenous and the left?
Antiminera y antineoliberal de los movimientos indígenas y sociales del Ecuador.
Mire, de hecho, el señor Daniel Noboa, que en un primer momento se vendía.
Indeed, Mr. Daniel Noboa, who initially portrayed himself as a defender of nature's rights, opposing oil extraction in Yasuní, thus garnering support from young people and environmentalists, has now shown a lack of respect for the popular consultation. The consultation had determined that oil should remain underground and not be exploited, yet he is turning a blind eye to it. The miners in a region called Palo Quemado in Cotopaxi have suffered brutal beatings. One citizen is hospitalized in a coma, completely incapacitated, while his wife has just given birth. These events are deeply regrettable, and it is evident that Noboa has a personal agenda rather than a genuine state agenda. We do not see any concerted efforts to address Ecuador's structural issues, such as violence and crime. When we handed over power in 2017, Ecuador's violent death rate stood at 5 per 100,000 inhabitants. Today, it exceeds 40 per 100,000 inhabitants, making us one of the most violent countries in the world. We have transitioned from being one of the safest to one of the most violent. During the Citizen Revolution government, the most prominent leaders of criminal gangs were arrested and nearly 4,000 criminal gangs were dismantled. On one hand, there were efforts to serve the population, improve living conditions, lift nearly 2 million people out of poverty, and invest in employment, health, education, and scholarships. On the other hand, there was a strengthening of the public security apparatus. However, in recent years, we have witnessed a significant deterioration in living conditions, citizens' rights, healthcare, education, environmental quality, and security. Moreover, there has been a reduction in the budget allocated to security investments, including in armed forces, the national police, and the justice system. Part of the state's security lies in a functioning justice system, including the prosecutor's office, the National Court of Justice, and the Judicial Council. Unfortunately, these institutions have become heavily politicized, primarily serving political persecution rather than effectively resolving cases of violence.
Tengo dos preguntas más. La primera es,
I have two more questions. The first is, there have been two cases in which something similar to what we are seeing now in Ecuador has played out. It is the Plan Colombia and the Merida initiative in Mexico, where there were terrorist outbreaks, and the United States came to assist and supposedly combat drug trafficking. In this case, President Daniel Noboa has declared a war on criminal gangs, but he has not declared a war on the cartels, which is a bit weird. And might also be a tactical issue, but what do you think? Because in Colombia and Mexico, drug trafficking grew during the 20 years of the Colombia Plan and the Merida Plan. Do you believe that the method they are using will work? It is possible to win this war on drugs, and are they even fighting it?
y que es posible de todo ganar esta guerra contra las drogas o la están peleando siquiera.
Mire, por ejemplo, voy a referirme a nuestro vecino, Colombia. Tiene cerca de 7 bases estadounidenses y no se ha reducido la guerrilla, el narcotráfico.
For example, let's look at our neighbor, Colombia, which hosts approximately 7 U.S. military bases. Despite this presence, guerrilla groups, drug trafficking, and parallel armed forces to the official public force have not been dismantled. Colombia continues to be one of the main producers of drugs. It's perplexing that, despite the existence of numerous American bases, there hasn't been significant improvement. It's not just about having weapons, it's about enhancing the living conditions of citizens. Now, what has transpired in Ecuador? All these criminal organizations that operated in Mexico and Colombia didn't infiltrate Ecuador because they perceived a country with a proactive government, a well-organized state, and a population that was looked after. But what changed? This is where the cockroach effect comes into play. Criminal groups observed that both Mexico and Colombia started taking stricter measures against drug trafficking. Consequently, the cartels sought alternative locations and found Ecuador, a country seemingly without effective governance, with deficient social policies and increasing poverty. It became the ideal hiding place, akin to the behavior of cockroaches. As the cartels embed themselves within the state apparatus, we witness a series of alarming developments. For instance, there are instances where scanners at ports suddenly malfunction, or investigations conducted by the Financial Analysis and Money Laundering Control Agency are hindered due to budget cuts and staff reductions. Furthermore, the criminal gangs gain control of prisons, using them as operational bases for their activities abroad. This infiltration allows them to maintain their grip and expand their influence. Something that is commonly practiced in prison management, even by common sense, is to categorize criminals based on their level of danger. The most high-risk individuals are placed in maximum security areas, and this organization is crucial. Members of the same criminal gang are never mixed together, as doing so would grant them the opportunity to operate more freely. However, what has been done by the government of Lenin Moreno? This logical approach to prison management has been disregarded. The budget has been slashed, and the state's involvement in prison policy has been dismantled. Gangs are now organized within the prisons. Each gang is allocated its own sector, which enables them to coordinate their activities. They can even access the internet and communicate with associates abroad from these sectors. During the tenure of Mr. Guillermo Lazo's government, a narco boss known as Ali Afito recorded a music video in prison. Surprisingly, this did not become international news, and somehow there isn't enough evidence to ascertain who truly handed the country over to organized crime.
para darnos cuenta de quién entregó el país al crimen organizado.
La Revolución Ciudadana casi gana las anteriores elecciones y sin duda me parece que es la primera fuerza política del país.
The citizens' revolution almost won the previous elections, and without a doubt, it seems to me that it is the first political force in the country. But at the same time, it has hit an electoral wall in the second round. It seems like there is a coordinated opposition, that is, a lot of specific resistance to the movement, and it is a big one. And it seems to me that part of that is that during Rafael Correa's government, there was a division on the left, especially on the side of the miner and the rejection to mining, the anti-mining movement, and the indigenous movement. It was a bitter cause of separation, no doubt. But at the same time, there's the question of knowing that there was corruption. And to which extent is there a renewal going on in the party? What are the lessons that you have learned from all of this, and what are your perspectives for being able to unite the indigenous and anti-mining left again under a single flag that can confront these very powerful right wings?
A unir a la izquierda, a los indígenas, a los antimineros, en una sola bandera que pueda enfrentarse a esta derecha tan poderosa.
Mire, que puedan haber existido casos de corrupción.
Look, were there cases of corruption, bad actors, and officials within the citizen revolution? Yes. Lenin Moreno is one of them. We ourselves have denounced him, and it's the political right that has shielded him. Moreno served as their spearhead in politically persecuting the citizen revolution. The evidence of his corruption, despite shamefully being part of our ranks, is undeniable. We were unaware of these actions, which is why we placed our trust in him. However, I believe this has also allowed us to cleanse our ranks of such element and rejuvenate our political cadres and actors. Despite this, we remain committed to a vision for our homeland. What unites all leftist movements is our dedication to serving our country and lifting it out of the current state of disaster. Poverty is on the rise, and migration increases every day. Witnessing children outside airports watching planes depart with their parents is heart-wrenching. Perhaps only those on the left truly feel this pain, as the right may find it beneficial for them to continue leaving, considering that remittances from migrants amounted to more than $5.5 billion last year, earned through the sweat and tears of Ecuadorian families. I believe all of this allows leftist movements who hold the country's best interests at heart to come together and progress. As part of the citizen revolution, we are open to dialogue and collaboration with all political actors who seek to restore dignity and hope to our country. We aim to show the world that Ecuador is a nation of peace, one that adheres to international regulations, and above all, a country that values life over the current prevailing sense of death.
Un país que ama la vida y no como ahora, que significa muerte.
Finally, do you have any message for the Mexican people and all the Mexicans who might be watching us now?
Yo quiero decirle a todo el pueblo mexicano, primero somos un pueblo hermano.
I want to address all the Mexican people. Firstly, we are brother countries with a long history of excellent relations between Mexico and Ecuador. We share many cultural similarities as Latin Americans, and we both hold a deep love for our shared homeland, Latin America, and our respective territories. The aggression Mexico experienced is neither the responsibility nor the fault of the Ecuadorian people. I urge that our citizens be welcomed with love and treated kindly. It's not our fault that an inexperienced president, who seems to think he runs a banana farm, has lashed out at Mexico. As Ecuadorians, the majority of our population has also condemned Daniel Noboa's actions against Mexico. We consider Mexico a sister nation. The poor decision of an inexperienced leader does not reflect the views of all Ecuadorians. We hope to overcome the situation in the near future. Furthermore, we expect President Noboa to apologize for his actions toward both the Mexican and Ecuadorian people who have been affected by his misguided behavior.
Y esperamos también del presidente Noboa que sepa pedir perdón por lo que le hizo al pueblo mexicano y al pueblo ecuatoriano, que nos vemos afectados también.